Right, but it's how the accounting works. I mean, that's not my, I don't know if you know anything better there, but.
Amber, go ahead.
We could
Right, but
put it
it's how the
into
accounting
Vizor
works.
first and then export those fees and give them to our financial secretary. But it's just a little bit more, it just feels a little more convenient right now to make a spreadsheet and give it to our financial secretary and get that information into Vizor later. But if you wanted to like avoid duplication, you could initially put those repairs right into Vizor and then just export that list to give to your.
Correct. So there is a sense of duplication here, and I can appreciate that. But we are talking about two different systems. One that really only the business services and finance care about. We don't have access to, we can't look up, we can't journal. And the other one that we have, which unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but as of today is not available to charge directly to students. We still have to use a TES to charge the students as far as that goes. So similar to what Amber said, there is, yeah, there is some duplication there, but we have our needs, and that's going to be found within Vizor for ongoing, situations, and they have their needs, which is just, hey, I just need to bill this kid once, and I don't care if it disappears afterwards, and there's no record or anything like that afterwards.
Right, so before this year, she was doing work orders, she was doing, you guys were supposed to be emailing her when you had those repairs done, so she could account for that. That's what she's doing for the technology side. And then she sums all that up and compares it to what she's actually got in the account from business services and what those charges were. Camille had a question.
So, it is a lot of duplication of work, especially when we get a lot of charges in here, because it takes a lot longer to put it in Vizor. Is there a reason that we can't just share the spreadsheet that we're sharing with our financial secretary for her to enter that into TES?
So that's kind of why we're waiting to put those charges until after school's done, after most of that has been returned, and then we're only putting those charges in for those lost Chromebooks and those chargers that never got turned in.
Those are from, I'm speaking from a high school perspective. These come in all the way through the end of June, at least, especially since we have summer school. That is not, the end of May is not gonna be the end all of when that happens.
Yeah, I understand that, but at some point we have to make an accounting. Whether it's the end of May or we make some adjustments for mid-June or whatever, that can still be adjusted there. But the majority of your stuff is going to be coming in, right?
There will never be an end-all of end-alls, unfortunately. It's a circular system in the regard of, if we say the end of May, or we can modify that to some date in June.
Yeah, I mean, we did say the end of May just to kind of give us a deadline, but it doesn't have to be that May 30th. We can adjust that as we need.
But as we do that, we also recognize that there's going to be students who don't return in August that all of a sudden we have to start billing for, and damages that took place over the summer that they acknowledge, or even in some cases they want them repaired over the summer. We've had students actually come in mid-summer and say, hey, I damaged my Chromebook in July. They want it repaired before school starts. So it's just kind of like the fiscal year, if you've ever worked in business and stuff like that. They set their fiscal year, they say this is the deadline. They know stuff's gonna happen before, they know stuff's gonna happen after, but they do have to, as Jason said, set a deadline somewhere in order to just say, okay, we want the majority of this accomplished by this time.
And I think it's because Michelle has to close out the year, right? At some point, by the end of June, probably?
I think she closes out the year, yeah, roughly about the end of June, because our fiscal year is July 1st, and then from that point, the money starts moving from the accounts that the schools are putting them into a centralized account here, and then from a centralized account here to some general funds, or we won't get into exact details, but into some general funds for technology and stuff like that. So there's additional dominoes that fall after that fact.
Yeah, and so the idea is that the reason why we end up putting those charges into Vizor is because Michelle needs to know, have an expectation of what she should be expecting in those accounts. And if that doesn't match up, then there's an issue, right? And this has been an issue ongoing for years. We're trying to get that closer to match up to what it needs to be.
And one of the reasons that we are trying to, or we're recommending putting it off until like end of May or even after, is that there will be more that are returned closer to May or June. And it's just gonna be less that you have to remove from Vizor, or less work to put it in and then have to remove it from Vizor again. If things are returned, you can remove them from, or just cancel the charge entirely.
Would there be a problem with waiting till the end of June at the end of summer school instead of the end of May?
That's a consideration we can look at. We can re-talk with Michelle. It was just, we initially were saying, oh, just immediately, but we're like, oh, we can just give you guys a week to get things back. And it really depends on what you're doing and what you have, right? If there's a lot of stuff, I get that, but if there's only 10 or 15 things that you're doing.
This is
might as well
Mountain
do it.
View, we got a lot of people making up work.
Okay.
My question or thought on that one is, we'll have to talk with Michelle, because again, we have deadlines set for us on the budget by district. And if we don't have them in by then there's a good possibility that some of those monies disappear because they just get, vaporized because they weren't in the right or correct year. I would probably, again, reiterate, hopefully over the last few weeks, your schools have been doing wellness checks and probably have a pretty fair idea of who doesn't actually have a Chromebook to turn in, who doesn't have their charger to turn in. So even if they are going through summer school and stuff like that, we're probably pretty aware of, hopefully probably pretty aware of everybody's situation after that wellness check. And then we're only talking about maybe a few weeks of summer school and what may happen during that time that we have to make an accounting for after that. Knowing that some schools have much larger summer schools programs than other schools, I think that can vary account-wise, but hopefully still be pretty minimal compared to the numbers that you guys will be able to gather during your wellness checks.
And as part of that, to me, if you have seniors that are not checking their Chromebooks in because they're going to go to summer school, maybe you account for that, and they don't end up on that lost charge document. So otherwise, they shouldn't be turning in their Chromebooks regardless of whether they're going to summer school, right?
Yeah.
So it just depends on how your school wants to handle those, but those are kind of more the exception. So if you get that list and you're like, well, we know this X amount, these people are actually going to summer school, then maybe you remove them from the list you're doing. I don't know, that's just a thought.
We have our counseling office who has a running spreadsheet that people can just add anybody who will be working on stuff over the summer, and so I know that list. And once I compile kind of the Chromebooks that haven't been returned, I'll be pulling those people out so they don't get a fine or they don't get a charge added. And we just kind of keep the list of who still has one over the summer and when they returned it. So it's kind of a separate spreadsheet, but it.
How does that true up with Vizor then? Are you constantly like putting it in here and then putting it in there and then putting it in here and then putting it in there as they come in and out? Like, we're duplicating work all over the place here.
So can you just have them, if they're seniors, can you just have them return it? I'm sure do you have a card of loaners for summer school anyway?
Well, then I'm doing double work on that side. Also, then I'm having to check Chromebooks in and out to seniors, because I don't have a library to do it.
Yeah, see, this is maybe a policy thing, I don't know, because your seniors are supposed to be turning their Chromebooks in at the end of the year. So if they're not doing that because they're going to go to summer school, how do you account for that in the first place?
Well, when we've
There's-
asked before, they have said that we, even for ones who don't graduate until September, that we are allowed to have them keep those until that point.
And that's correct. And unfortunately, being the fact that we live in a sucky world, there's not going to be a policy that is able to fix all of these problems. We have to have a policy that plows down the middle and takes care of the high percentage. 90%, 95% of your seniors walk out the door at the end of the year, graduated or not graduated. There are a few super seniors who will stick around and do some summer school and stuff like that, but I don't think there's any way that we can adjust the policy to accommodate, you know, the 15 that AFI has, and the 12 that Lone Peak has, and the 30 that, you know, it would be overly complex and almost ridiculous to follow if we tried to make a separate policy for all of that. So, to your point, it does seem like a headache to say, okay, well, checking in the senior Chromebook now, I'm checking it out for the, half a dozen, however many seniors that are legitimately going through Alpine to get their graduation credits before September. But I don't know any other way to avoid that, other than like what Jen was saying. You could check in their primary device and give them a loaner device, but then that creates another issue. There's no magic bullet here, guys.
Do you
I think
check
we're
out
talking
learners
about two
to
different
other
issues.
students or students who are around?
During the summer,
Yeah.
I'm the only one that can do it.
Okay.
That
No, but-
happens.
And then
But
one
they do
is
have-
the
And I have done it
check in,
on
check
onesie
out.
twosie basis.
I'm
They
not
don't
even
really
addressing the
do
check in and
usually.
check out, that's not
I
gonna
usually
change.
try to keep them.
People are gonna come, go,
I'll
whenever
have
they're
a
gonna
lot
come
of
and go.
students. This is
It's how
my
we submit the
particular
fines,
trick.
and
A lot of
the
times.
the necessity to have the fines match in Vizor. If that is the standard we're doing, Vizor has to be the standard, then I guess we just submit fines in Vizor all the time, like for every single thing. What I have been doing is if a charge is missing, I just tell the financial secretary charger's missing. I don't even bother putting it in Vizor.
All right, do you
Up
let
until
Michelle know
this
that?
point. Up until this point, no, I didn't know that I needed to
Okay.
tell that.
See, that's
Until
the
like
part that's
this
missing.
second. So is that, what I'm trying to clarify is, do we need to document everything in Vizor from now on? Period. So if there's a missing charger, document it in Vizor, then submit it in TS, and then they have to match from now on.
Yeah, so throughout the year, that, you are doing those repairs and those chargers or whatever in the repair module and the charges area. And the financial secretary is supposed to be making those, taking those new charges and putting them individually into TES. But at the end of the year, we have such a bulk that the way to do it in mass, instead of her taking each of those individually, this is the recommendation that we're trying to do with the.
Is just let some of those come back, trickle back first. Let's get some, what percentage of the ones that don't come back end up coming back eventually? A lot, right? And so we just didn't want you to have to make a record for each individual one. Wait until a lot of those have been returned.
Right, we can wait, but there's deadlines on the financial side.
Well, right, so the financial side already has that information, and it's charged. If it comes back, they clear that fine.
So when is the deadline that Michelle needs them to match?
We're gonna find
I
out.
guess that's the primary driver.
Right, all of this has to happen prior to that, and that's not a deadline that happens here in May. She was gonna do that sometime in June. So there's not pressure to put those in immediately during this month. That's why we're saying towards the end of the month or into June, if those items that haven't been returned, then we would put those in. All right, right here.
So, just to confirm, I know what's happening. Vizor, by sometime in June, I need Timberline's Vizor to match Timberline's TES as far as Chromebook charges. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to,
Okay.
but it's, yeah, I mean, it's not your job to match it, right?
I
Your
need
job
to make
is
sure
to-
both financial secretaries are on the same page.
Right, and
Okay,
so
okay.
you're gonna be working again with your financial secretary once this process is done and most of those have been returned, whatever the deadline that we end up saying it is. And then you'll put those charges into Vizor, so it can be accounted for on the technology side. So,
We also assumed that many of you may not even be, most of you probably should, but you might not be covering the aspect where they're putting chargers, recording chargers missing. And so we wanted to give you an alternative, like, so that other people could report the chargers as well. Does that make sense? Like, we're just, I know the spreadsheet, is that what you're saying, is the spreadsheet seems like extra work? But
No, it's the duplication of binding, because it's already recorded in TES, and honestly, I
So
don't need
right.
to talk about it, I just need to be told.
So that's why you create a
But it
charge and then
doesn't
just
make
immediately
any
say,
sense to
a charge to
duplicate-
student, which negates the charge.
But we're saying that we're creating a spreadsheet, which we're already doing for our financial secretary, so
Yeah.
why are we just not, instead of duplicating it in Vizor, why are we just not
Because you have to
sharing
go
that?
through and close all those accounts
Is
and
there a way
charge
to
it
mass
in
import into
Vizor.
freaking Vizor?
are you gonna have that many fines and charges?
Probably.
Yeah, oh yeah.
75.
Well, I don't know, I could do 30, I
Define
guess.
how
These are
many
fair
that you would
questions, these are fair
justify.
questions.
How many would justify a mass import?
I'd have to check and see what.
Like 100, or like what would you want to mass import? If you were doing it?
20 or above.
Is this what you were saying,
20 or
Amber?
above.
The mass
No, I was
update,
about the other way.
Student, so
I was talking about
10%.
clearing them.
clearing them. But you can clear them, mass, clear them, not mass.
All right, so,
None.
yeah,
So
I mean, we
not
can look
for
at
this
that, I don't know if it's an option or not, so there's that aspect of it, so we'll look at that and see, but really, I mean,
Mass import?
yeah, I mean, I don't,
Of what?
I'm not in the schools, we've talked to a few of you, and based on what you guys have said, it didn't appear that it's going to be a wild number of charges that actually end up being charged.
Maybe we can get a little input from Adam on what Adam thinks. I know, sorry, throwing you under. Do we get any kind of input, direction on, have you been listening to the discussion?
Just say yes or no.
Well, I mean, he doesn't really know either, I mean, that's the problem, we don't know what you guys are seeing.
Now it's getting interesting.
I don't know what they're asking, but I should know. Maybe I do know. Yes. Okay, sorry.
Let's sum it up.
Yes, no, maybe.
What are you saying? But in just so Adam knows.
What I'm saying is, basically what I want to get to is, why do we put fines we already submitted to TS into Vizor? When we could easily import that data from that spreadsheet into Vizor. I couldn't, but they probably could.
So you're saying that you want to use TES as the first and maybe primary source of data, and then just
For
import
files.
that into Vizor versus, and I'm
Right.
assuming we're talking about putting the data into Vizor as well as making a copy of that data sent over to TES.
No, I think what they're talking about is the primary source of information is off the spreadsheet.
It is off.
The spreadsheet that's gonna go into TES, and then using that same data from that same spreadsheet to go into Vizor. So it's one spreadsheet just pushed out to two systems.
So that's exactly what some of the schools have been doing. The difference is that that same spreadsheet is being used to mark whether that fine has been cleared. There's no reason for us to put a cleared fine into Vizor. That's why we would wait and then put only those fines that are needed into Vizor.
I guess the
For
question
Michelle.
is-
'cause
So
there's
if
two
we need
goals here,
to
two
look
goals.
at that, remove those that are cleared and see what that number looks like, if it's a lot, then we can discuss whether we need to import those. Tommy?
It seems to me that there's a lot of conversation on how the process gets done. And Mike, you said at the beginning of the meeting, that's gonna vary from site to site. But throughout the conversation, it seems to me that there's probably some confusion on the process of why we enter repairs into Vizor and how Michelle uses that data, which is why we enter it in Vizor at the end of the year, right? Like, so for me and what I worked out with my financial secretary is we'll be using a spreadsheet, because I think it's a great idea, and we'll import that into TES, but we're also gonna keep an eye on it as things come in, and then we're gonna wait, which is why I asked the original question about Michelle as far as time, before I enter in those charges into Vizor, right? That's neither here nor there, that's just the process we worked out, right? And it sounds like everybody has a little different way of doing that, but does everybody understand why Michelle needs, like, Vizor, like, it's the stuff we talked about when Vizor went implemented, right? We use product the district provides us, the school has to pay for that product if we use it for a student, and the school recoups that cost by charging the individual for whatever repair was done. And Michelle gets those fees from Vizor. Beforehand, we were supposed to have been giving Michelle a report of the products we used for repair. So that might be where there's confusion, and then there can continue to be debate about whether or not there's a faster way to do it. But we're really clear on the system that was set up at the beginning of this year when Vizor went live, is my question. Because then we can have the debate on what's best for your school and what's best for this school or what's best for that. That's kind of you and your coordination with your financial secretary. But if everybody understands the working pieces, that's probably paramount to the discussion, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But it would be easier if we could import it, is what you're saying. And
Yes.
that's reasonable.
If we can use
try to
one
see about that.
spreadsheet, have one source of information, and have it get to all the needed parties, that's what we want.
Yeah, but the problem is that one spreadsheet has information that needs to be taken out. So
That's easy, yeah, you just delete a column, or,
Create a new sheet and
create a
copy
new
and
sheet with
paste
just those,
versions.
copy and
And
paste.
we could
That's
get
what
you a
most of us
template
do.
to what you needed. if you
yeah, and I
figured
get
out.
that. So we
It's fair.
we
It's
still don't
reasonable.
know if we can
It's reasonable.
import fines
Yeah.
into Vizor. We will look into that. Currently, what I see, I do not see that as an option, but we can look at that.
Is there a way we could just take the spreadsheet we're sending to our financial secretary, and maybe Michelle has her own spreadsheet we could use, copy it from there, what needs to be added, and now she has the list like we would be sending it to her anyway, or we're supposed to.
So now you're going, so yeah, I mean.
That's all I'm saying.
You're right. It's just a matter of where the work is happening, right?
Michelle,
So-
but Michelle doesn't know. Like, she's getting that information from Vizor. So,
Okay.
yeah. Am I wrong?
But you're saying if you had the email, could you send that? Or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
list?
Well, what I'm saying
That's
is,
what I was
if
actually
Michelle
just
made a
wondering.
spreadsheet that we could all
Can we get
fill
Michelle in here?
in with whatever's, what we know we have to charge, then she can just look at the spreadsheet and she can add those fines as needed on
now you're
the
adding it.
deadline,
You're now adding a ton of work to Michelle.
Okay, and that's what I did.
Right?
I was just
And
trying
we
to.
Yeah,
told
I mean-
her.
I don't wanna
we
add
told her
more work to
Vizor would-
Michelle, she does enough as it is, so.
Yeah, prior to
Right.
Vizor,
Right.
a lot of this was being tracked through requisitions in FileMaker and along that side. And then also, so that was for like repairs specifically, but other things that were being charged, like MDM and those other things, you guys were supposed to be letting her know. I mean, MDM's outside of this altogether, but.
So, Jason, I mean, again, there's 12 different routes that this could take, and there's pluses and negatives to all of them legitimately. I think Tommy hit it a little bit on the head there. William, you hit it a little bit on the head there. The fact of the matter is, there is going to be a certain amount of work that needs to be done, period. In the past, before Vizor, you guys were supposed to, and I said supposed to because not everybody obviously was, you're supposed to be making a count of the parts that you're using and either A, emailing them to Michelle or Shauna, putting together a spreadsheet. Some of you guys use spreadsheets, some of you guys put in a work order for each one of those. We had 3 or 4 different methods that you guys were supposed to be using in order to get those parts and the costs to Shauna and now Michelle. What we're talking about here is, this may not be the easiest one at each level, but instead of a spreadsheet privately shared between you and the financial gal, or an email that you just tap together and let them take care of the rest of it. Shauna loved that, by the way. Or a separate work order for every single one of these situations. It's, here's Vizor, put it all in here. And granted, in some of these cases, it does mean a little bit more on your side as far as deleting rows or columns or cleaning up a spreadsheet before you do an import, or just putting them in manually. But imagine Michelle or Shauna in the past trying to do that. 27 different locations, 3, 12, 15 repairs per location on her side. So again, guys, we know that this isn't necessarily going to make every situation easier or even everybody's life easier, but this is how we're consolidating that process and going to move forward in order so that, again, even as we've heard about in this meeting, oh, were we supposed to be doing this, or were we supposed to be making an account of those parts? Dane gave me 12, screens, and I handed out 7 of them. Who got billed? Who's the plan?
I think they were free.
Exactly. So in that regard, we're cleaning it up here, guys.
I just want to want clarification. So we get our spreadsheet, get it to our financial secretary. Then I go ahead after financial secretary, kids bring back devices, they're gonna bring back all of the devices. I go through that spreadsheet, clean it up. Then I go ahead, take that list, what is left, I go to Vizor. If I add charges to the student on Vizor, does that go to my financial secretary, and do I need to let her know not to touch those? Or does that go straight to Michelle?
So after you set the spreadsheet and you put something in the Vizor, the suggestion was to change the status of the charge to, that's called student account charged. That
Okay.
closes it out.
Okay.
And then the financial secretary is looking for new charges.
Yeah, and
They won't see that.
Okay.
I'm not sure I can phrase this right, but I think part of the discussion that we're having here that makes it awkward is that we've, as a organization and administration of it, have decided to use Vizor as this primary tool for dealing with a bunch of things with Chromebooks, which is great. And we made a determination that we were going to put charges into it as they occur during the year. And so the challenge is, are we gonna make a totally separate system at the end, for end of the year, that's different than what we've been doing all year long, other than the timing thing for things that we think are gonna come back and have to be put into charges.
No, you,
So
at
I-
any
so
point, you
that's
can
the-
put it in. We're
that-
just saying, if you don't want to, wait, right?
That's
I mean,
all
you
I'm
could,
saying is,
right?
it's the same process that we've talked about for the entire year. All we're doing is, we just have this compressed time with a lot more devices all at once. And we can minimize some of that work by doing the spreadsheet for part of it and then importing back what we need to.
Correct. Thank you.
Well said. Go on.
Was that just the first bullet?
Yeah.
Part will be with this many by.
But a lot of this applies to the
is
other.
similar. It's the same idea.
It's applicable all the way through.
Let's see. Just to wrap this up, yeah, so last step, create a charge of $30, set the charge status to student account charged. Since you already sent the information over, you can close out the charge by setting it to student account charged. And that way, they don't get charged twice for that. Okay, next step, or next scenario, I suppose, is during check-in, Chromebook comes to you damaged or needing repair. So a suggestion that we have is to kind of have a central location where if you have multiple people checking in devices, if something looks damaged or if there's an issue, have them send them to you or to a different line so that you can kind of assess the damage. And then with that one, you would create like a normal repair, like normal, and then you do a couple net bids. One is you can immediately right then or that same day or recently is you can kind of create a visor charge for the damage, if it's a cracked screen or anything like that, set the status to new, and then the financial secretary sees it, adds it to TES, kind of like what has been done throughout the year. The other option is record the fine on that shared spreadsheet and make a charge in Vizor and set it to student account charge. So, and that can kind of be done early because if somebody comes to you with a cracked screen, we're not really worried about the cracked screen fixing itself. We're more worried about chargers coming back or Chromebooks coming back. So this can be done earlier or it can be done same time end of May or early June. Questions or thoughts on repairs?
So, you mentioned cracked screen, I know we're kind of, I think I'm jumping a little bit. I'm working on computers during the summer, I find a cracked screen. Does Vizor have a history that I can look up the previous user of that device? Just double check.
In Chromebooks and assets, you can look at the history.
Okay, I thought there was, I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, so just, it's just basically a log of that. So under the device, if you go up to into the details of it and you hit history, you can see all the fields that have changed, and the one that you'd be looking for would be allocated to. And the person that it had been allocated to would be there, so you could see that history there.
And also, there is a third item there that Amber shared with us, and I thought, Amber, would you mind sharing it with us? Is there something about, you can do an auto,
Is it a big deal? It's not meant to be like me on yellow, but,
it was for discussion.
Yeah, okay, so there are two options here for, A and B, for, if you have, Chromebooks that need repair that got turned in, right, at the end of the year. So, the, A was you can create a charge in Vizor and then let the secretary deal with it the normal way. Or B, you could add it to that spreadsheet. If you have like a whole bunch of damaged keyboards or screens or whatever, you can just put them all and you collect it. Like in the middle schools, we're gonna have a lot more of those than seniors because we have more students that are turning them in. So I might have like 10 bad keyboards or whatever. So rather than making the new charge, I can put it in the spreadsheet and then upload it with all those other charges. And then C, I was just pointing out that it's really just a variation on A. You could put the charge in Vizor, and if you have a lot of them, like I will in the middle school, then you could export and send that to be all ported into TES at once. And so that's really the only difference between A and C, is that on step A, you were just leaving it new for the financial secretary to hit them one at a time. But with this C option, you can say, well, I'm gonna export them because there are so many, so that they all get bulk charged. So we could probably delete C and just like put a note on A, like instead of leaving it new, you could export them and then mark them charged.
So, okay.
I hope that wasn't like complicating it worse. It was, so, yeah, we can get those.
So, yeah, like this one would be number 3.
Yeah, we can add to that.
Yeah, and it would actually, that would work out a lot better if we had an option in the financial fines and charges to mass update them all to, and maybe we will at some point have an option to mass update them to those students have been charged, instead of having to go into each record one at a time and saying, okay, those aren't anymore there.
And we can look for that, because I know that in like other views, like repairs and Chromebooks and assets, there's the check boxes, so you can select multiple things. And then charges and fees, I don't believe they have the check boxes to select multiple charges all at once, but there is an option that says mass update selection, which is helpful. So we'll see if that's an option that we can add to the fines and charges and fees section, so that you can change them all at once. Any other questions about repairs as they come in? Okay.
Does that look right, Amber?
Yeah, that's great.
Except for the yellow?
Except for the yellow.
Okay.
Once you have a repair, if a repair comes in, make sure you check it in Vizor. And then assess the charge and put that into Vizor and TES in one of those two options. Senior buybacks, I know that is kind of done in multiple ways at multiple schools. If they want to buy back, most people do it during check-in, or do they do it like as they're checking in, they'll kind of set it aside, or deprovision it right then and there with them? Is that what everybody kind of does here?
Buybacks, do we need to immediately deprovision? Do we need to do anything in Vizor related to this?
There is a status changed in Vizor the status is retired student buyback. So you can change that status.
So when you do deprovision the device, that status, it does translate over to Vizor for you automatically.
So
Right.
automatically.
Well, no?
Or from
I don't think so.
So,
Provision from filing?
I would love that.
Me too.
It's supposed to change the status, the
it
Google
goes surplus
status to
and then
retired.
FileMaker.
Or, sorry, it's set as deprovision, but the other status in Vizor is supposed to be set to retired if it's deprovisioned.
we'll have to look at that.
Automatically
We just
or
added the additional
manually?
status,
No.
so you should change that.
Because I think I've had to do it manually on multiple computers.
So let me.
It should be.
At what
I
point in
haven't really
time, because
tested it.
we had JM do
this
fix this
week.
for us like this week, where you deprovision it in Google and it still shows active in.
Honestly, I didn't know it was
Vizor.
automatic, so I just went in there and flipped the thing. How long does it take to sync?
It,
If it syncs
I
at
can
all,
read a couple twice a day or something.
I can't
So,
remember what
I
the time it
guess-
is on that.
we could test it and see.
We can test and see. It should, yeah, it should be.
So we're doing it in Google Admin and FileMaker, but not
We're
Vizor.
doing it in 3.
Jason? Thoughts?
Yeah, we have to test it.
I was under the impression that that was fixed when we tested it before.
It worked for, I've deprovisioned a few and it's worked every time for me.
That's
How quickly?
I didn't time it, but it was like the same day.
It should be within the hour or something like that, I think is how that sync happens, but
We'll just test it out.
Let's test it again.
Do we still
If
need
it's
to
not.
touch FileMaker also though?
yes.
Okay, so we're down to 2, not 3.
If it's on.
We'll test it, make sure it's working.
Also, if you retire it if you retire something in Chromebooks and assets,
Vizor.
in Vizor, if you retire it, it seems to automatically check in it for the student, like it's not assigned to a student.
Yeah.
Right, because if
you
it's
change that
retired,
status.
it's not checked out to a student anymore. so.
Yeah, so you don't have to go check it in and then retire it. You just-
Correct, yeah, it'll, on assignment, automatically. Just points on that. So with buybacks, you would go through and just kind of deprovision it like normal, check it in through Vizor, set the status, which would check it in. And then, depending on how you guys do it, if you guys immediately deprovision them, remove them from FileMaker, deprovision them in Google Admin, and then power wash it and hand it back to the student. Or however anybody else does it, and, or if you guys do it kind of where you deprovision them and send them the instructions on how to power wash it. But the only exception on that is just make sure if anybody's doing A/B testing, provide a loaner, because that won't be there, or the app won't be there for them to take the test. Questions, thoughts, any good ways anybody's doing buybacks?
There's a question mark by provide loaners. I guess it's up to the school to decide.
My school we do a mass turn-in, half the AP users just keep their Chromebook, they'll get a fine, and then they'll remove the fine once they turn in the Chromebook.
Yeah, and that's what we're.
So we don't do loaners.
My question is related to senior buybacks that may come back as damaged or not returned at all. So kind of related to these last two topics, my admin loves to do the $30 charge for devices that are 4 years old that are gonna go to surplus anyway, but may have a broken screen or they lost it, for example. So is that
Yes. So yeah, I'll still stand by that policy. If you got to the end of the year, the senior comes back and he has a cracked screen, even a missing device, you know, at that point, we're not trying to recoup the cost of the device for $150. The device was gonna go out the door, either to surplus or to him anyways. So $30, and technically he bought the device.
Yeah, if you see .6
When
right
does that
here.
go into effect during the year?
Only seniors.
Like May, or at the beginning of the senior year?
It varies based off of my mood.
Okay, so how are you feeling right now?
So honestly, to tell you the truth, it usually, I don't have like a set date in my mind, but usually come March, end of March, April, where it's along the lines of, okay, these guys were heading out the door, you know? They're seniors, they're showing up one day a week anyways. So in that regard, that's when but if it is at the beginning of the year, if it's like, hey, it's November, then I think the rules still apply.
Okay, good question on that.
Yeah, it's noted here in 6, right above senior buybacks. But yeah, I mean, obviously it has to be eligible for surplus anyways, a 1-year-old device.
I think it's nice to play that one as a grace scenario rather than a policy.
Right, yeah.
And just, because that makes the admins, makes finance people look good, makes school look good, and it's no skin off of our people.
How is that gonna be reflected in the fines, though? We mark it as a lost device. Do we need to mark it as a senior lost device?
Or a buyback?
If it's just a buyback that didn't get returned and they paid for it,
Yeah.
you would just do it as a.
I'm confused.
Yeah, at that point, if it was lost, if it was lost since the beginning of the year, and they just kind of held their breath all the way to the end of the year, no dice. But if they come to you in April and they acknowledge it's lost, I think at that point, the administration can present them with the option, and I like exactly how Art said that, with the grace of saying, okay, at this point, you know, you have a couple options. You can buy it back for $30, but if you insist that you need to have another device to finish the year, then we'll go the traditional route, say $150, we'll give you a device that will get you through the rest of the year.
I guess I'm just wondering, when I put in the fee into Vizor, do I just put in $30 if it's a senior? You know?
There is no
in
buyback
June
option
when I'm
to
putting
ES,
in
is there?
the 100 fees I need to do?
For fines and fees, is there a?
Yeah, I mean, they have to account for it somehow.
Yeah, there has to be a
Like,
record.
you could just put a charge for 30, since they're senior,
Right.
$30 on the sheet, I guess?
You
Or,
also have to look before you leave, because I got a lot of seniors with 3-year-old Chromebooks, not 4-year-old Chromebooks.
Yeah.
that's what I said,
That's why the term eligible should
Right,
be
right.
very specifically.
yeah,
Look before you leave.
Just another thing to think about when you're typing in your fees.
right.
Very true.
There's a lot to keep track of.
Just out of curiosity, for senior buybacks, what are you guys seeing, like a
How
lot?
many are, yeah, how
A
many
couple?
are
What
Yeah.
are they?
Last year,
Maybe
75.
it's a school, we have
75
price
a Mountain View?
Yeah.
Do you have any more? Anyone?
Somewhere in that number.
Okay.
I'd say 100 out of 800.
So you have
Per
about a
license.
hundred. Okay.
So it's getting better. It used to be like 20. People, I guess maybe they didn't know about it, right?
Well, part of it was they were using these old devices that no one wanted anyway.
Yeah, that's true. They're still big.
So 75,
It's worth
100,
keeping
what
just for
else
the
you got?
charger. Buying just for the charger.
400?
You have 400 buy back their devices?
Wow.
I've had almost 300.
That's like almost a 1-to-1.
No,
It is.
well, not when you have 1,000 kids.
A third?
But that's Cedar Valley, they go out and ski.
You didn't invite me.
I did. He said he was gonna be gone today.
With the Chromebooks?
And
I told him he'd be glad.
Probably cheaper than.
Oh, Does anybody have a way they'd like to share how they do senior buybacks? I've seen Tom's procedure, and I've seen Camille's, and they're both really good. Does anybody else have one that they'd like to share?
Well, just one, because Mountain View always somehow finds a way to be the very last people that do the senior returns. We make the seniors clean everything off, except for the district stickers. We take them all in, I process them, I drop off a nice batch off in our student financial office, and then the seniors come back and buy them back a week after graduation.
It's not even necessarily theirs.
No, we won't, because the first time we did it, we tried to do theirs, and then they said, oh, then I don't have to clean it up? Well, no, you're gonna buy it back. And then what I ended up doing was spending a week cleaning off all the stickers of all the seniors who did not buy back their laptops.
So here's the thing, you don't really have to do that, because they're just going to surplus.
Well, if they were 4 years old, they would.
Well, if they're 4 years old, they're not.
What's that?
Yeah, they could buy back, you're right.
This is a great question, I hadn't, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure how kosher that is.
Yeah, 'cause the whole
It is
concept
that
is-
they would get their own. For those that are not eligible for buyback, I believe, and Adam can clarify, Surplus has Chromebooks for seniors that they can purchase for those that are not eligible for buyback.
So what happens to the senior who got a 3-year-old Chromebook when he graduates
not
instead of a
eligible.
4-year-old?
They're not eligible.
So they
they're
can
not
go buy
eligible.
one at
So they have
Surplus.
the option of coming to Surplus and buying.
So they could buy a Surplus for $35 versus the other senior who's lucky enough to get the
No,
one.
Thirty.
for
It's the same
for 30.
price.
Whatever the price
It's the
is.
same
So,
price.
so let me just kind of, lay that one down. We do want the seniors to buy back their device, their specific device. No harm, no foul.
Yep.
But we do want the seniors to buy back their specific device, because the logic behind that was, if these seniors, who were once ninth graders back in the day, take care of their device that they got in ninth grade, in 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, they get to buy it back unless the desire to not pop off your keys and scroll, dirty things in the plastic or whatever. So that should be the standard. The other side of that is, we don't care what, I shouldn't say we don't care, but we don't have strong feelings in the regard of how the devices come back to Surplus. If there's still stickers on the devices when they go to the pallets on Surplus, so be it. The guys that are buying these devices off of Surplus are buying pallets of Chromebooks for pennies on the dollar. I don't want you guys, I don't want school staff, and I don't even care if the students, I don't want them to put time into cleaning those off.
Unless it's their name and school ID, I would say that needs to get removed.
And if you have a sticker on there that says, hey, this belongs to Camille Gardner, Cedar Valley, have them peel that off if they're not buying it back. Now, as far as the students that aren't eligible, hopefully we're moving more and more away from this since we've gotten things synced up. But if you still do happen to have a number of seniors that graduate with a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old or a 1-year-old device, the game plan for that, twofold. And either one of these options work. As Jason was mentioning, they are more than welcome to turn in, they're required to turn in their device at the school, and then they are more than welcome to come down here to Surplus and buy one. I have also given permission, if principals have asked, and it's I don't necessarily swing these doors wide open, but it is open, that if they have another device from another senior who has indicated firmly that they are not going to purchase their Chromebook back, they can purchase somebody else's Chromebook at the school. So they don't even have to come down, and there should be absolutely no differing in prices either there or here on the buyback. That makes sense, Eric?
Yes, there is still one wrinkle left, and this is probably my last year where I'm gonna have such a mixture of aged Chromebooks, amongst my seniors, and that is the seniors with the 3-year-old Chromebooks that have plastered their Chromebooks with stickers and stuff like that. We still want them to clean it off, but
Those
it's
ones still have
really, really difficult to differentiate the Chromebooks, because at this age, not all the Chromebooks have the rotation year in the name yet. A lot of them do, but a lot of them don't. And so we don't know which students we have to tell, hey, this is a 3-year-old Chromebook, you clean it. This is a 4-year-old Chromebook, we don't care. And so we make them all clean them.
That being the case, I'm not saying it's mandatory, but I'm also not saying that if your school wants to do it, that they can't do it. I mean, if like in your scenario, 50% of them are gonna get cycled back in or whatever again, have them clean them off. But just know, it's not mandatory. When you guys get into the cycle where 99% of your seniors are walking out with the right year, there's no reason why they'd have to clean off the stickers before they walk out with the device or send anything to surplus. But in your current case, what I'm saying, we won't make it mandatory, but if you guys choose to do it, feel free to do it.
Okay.
But let's make sure, A, they're going with their device, and B, they get charged the same amount as anybody else.
All right, thanks for that tangent on senior buybacks.
Just curious. It seems like the first year, there was a few people were like, yeah, we had 3 people do it. So it's interesting that
Yeah,
there's
it
more
is.
buy-in.
Realize Cedar Valley was going 50%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Okay.
That's good.
I mean, that's great. That's just less to process through surplus.
Less on the pallet.
Well, we have a break before we go to the next section. I was going to read to you what Michelle said in response to when you should have, her process. It says, honestly, well, I asked her, when do you close out the year for charges where you true up the text input? Honestly, it's at the end of June. Usually each finance secretary has a final due date sometime in June that fines have to be paid before the parent will be sent to collections. Once the secretary finalizes everything at the end of June, the district will run a report for each school to see how much they collected and will then journal that amount into the correct tech account. That is when I square up and match up the reports. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes with them too, right? It's a lot of work for everybody.
What happens if Vizor doesn't match the fines?
You're fired. She says it usually doesn't, but you try to get as close as possible.
Yeah, so that has been a problem in the past, that
Yeah.
what we've collected versus what we've accounted for has been vastly different. And so you're just trying to get that a lot closer. So we're changing our process a little bit to do that. She's changing some of the things she's doing to do that. So it's just to have better accounting of what, of where that's going. And so, thanks.
But it's a legitimate question. It's one obviously we've been dealing with since the start of the next gen. There are going to be situations every single year where something flew under the radar or an administrator granted a waiver and sometimes didn't even bother to tell you about it. I just have, in the past, I've just had enough in the budgets and just make that problem go away. Yeah, the kids might have gotten away with one, or the administrator might have gotten away with, something there or whatever. I don't want to fight the fight. You guys don't need to fight the fight. But we, as Jason said, this is just hopefully helping us get a lot more accurate in this process. So that gap isn't so big. And honestly, it was smaller when it was just, the first 6 or 7 of you guys that were on it. And then it was a little bit bigger when the next 6 or 7 came on. Now we got 27 schools on it, and if the administrators keep on forgiving so many or whatever, this number just keeps on getting bigger. So we're just trying to hold it reasonably, but don't lose sleep. Don't fret, don't pick fights. If the numbers aren't exact, we'll make up the difference.
All right, good question on that. Any other questions, comments? Put a link to the buyback topic.
Oh, that.
All right.
Just wanted to-
So for the other scenario, the Chromebook not returned, so the big one. So student doesn't return it, Chromebook doesn't show up, how are we gonna get that information? This is we kind of put it in the order of on the check-in day, what information you want to pull. For the chargers and for the repairs, you kind of want to do that as they come in. At the very end of the day or the process of check-in, you're gonna run a list. You can run a kind of a report in Vizor to figure out all the devices that are still assigned to students that are seniors. So what we've done is we've created a template in the Chromebooks and Assets view. And there's a template assigned device grade level 12, and then template assigned device grade level 7 and 8, or 7 and 8 are individual ones as well. So what you can do is you can run that template for assigned device, grade level, whatever is needed, and then add a filter for location to your school. And then we have a column layout for TES import. So if you change the layout to TES import, it will only show the information kind of in the rows that should be required for the TES spreadsheet that you need to do. So it would do the student ID, and it would do a comment, the amounts you need to kind of put in manually based on whether or not it's a buyback or whether or not it's a 150 required return device. And then it would also import or export with the student's name at the end. If there's any extra fields on this, you'll just need to get rid of any access fields, so there's no E column.
Yeah, so we just tried to match it up as well as we could to that initial template. We're able to do a little bit with that, but like the amount, there's gonna have to be some manipulation after the fact. We don't have an amount that we can put in as a column, and there's some other details here that we'll go through.
And then you can take that information, you can put it into the spreadsheet that you would be sending to the financial secretary. And then we also recommend on the last day of school, making sure to disable any of the unreturned devices. That's something you can also run the same report for all the assigned devices still assigned to either seniors or 7th and 8th graders. And then you can export that from Vizor, get a list of the serial numbers, and then send to the Fresh Desk ticket to support leads to disable them all in Google Admin manual or automatically, so you can have them all just disabled. At this point, you can wait until, similar to what we talked about, wait till end of May or June to allow the Chromebooks to come back in. Once they come back in, or once you get to that point, start recording in Vizor charges for unreturned devices. Let's see. End of May, you can export a new list, similar to what we just did, and do similar process, change the device to stolen in FileMaker, change the status to lost in Vizor. You would leave it as disabled in Google Admin, and then you create the charge 150 or 30 in Vizor, and change the status to student account charged, because you already sent that over. Questions, comments, concerns?
Gripes.
Gripes.
Yeah,
We've already been doing that.
that's good. That's called discussion. That's what we wanted.
So
So we'll make
just
it better.
going back to that layout, it's not perfect, and there's been a couple of concerns on exactly what we would want for the comment area. There's a couple of options you have there. Right now, we had just put in there the asset ID, and so a comment was maybe we put the model of the Chromebook in there. Whatever the comment is what's going in that TES comment field, kind of the description field or summary field, so they understand what that charge is. So this is what they would see on that specific charge. So it's hard to know exactly what to do. So there's some things you can do, like we could just put the model in there instead of the asset number if you think that would be fine. The other option is that you could concatenate the asset number with some words that say Chromebook not returned or whatever. So you just have to do that, and if you you wanna learn how to do that, or if you don't already, you can contact one of us and we can kind of walk you through that, but it just means you're gonna have to manipulate that field some way so you can get a good description for TES entry.
The important thing on that is if a parent or student's looking in and they just see a bunch of numbers on a chart for 150 and they don't know exactly what that means, but if it says lost Chromebook or Dell Chromebook, they'll know what that means. They don't know if they need to return that, so. Thoughts on that?
Amber?
Okay, I was just wondering, like, we downloaded a list of all the missing Chromebooks initially, right after they were all checked in. And we gave those to the financial secretary by her deadline in a spreadsheet, so she could charge everybody, right?
That is this right here.
Right, and then some of the students, not a lot, but some of them may be like, their families may be like, yeah, that Chromebook's gone, and they pay the fee, and then, like, then we do an export later of the ones missing, like, it seems like I would just wanna use the spreadsheet because I can tell which ones have been not returned and which ones have been paid, because I still wanna put the paid ones in Vizor, right? Because
No.
You want to keep track of payment.
As long
Or
as
the
it's
payments,
already.
yeah, we don't care about whether it's paid or not, we care if the fine's been cleared, we don't have to put it in Vizor. If it's a paid charge, yeah, we still need to put that in Vizor, sorry, I kind of misunderstood that.
yeah, so I'm just like wondering if those paid ones are getting lost in this process. Not that there would be very many of them. I mean,
How do you account for the ones that are then
Yeah,
paid for, and
you
maybe
don't
they didn't
care
come
whether
back,
they're
but
paid
they
or
were
not,
paid
you
for?
just care that there was a charge.
Well, that's, with a lost one, you would want, because you'd have to account for it in Vizor. You have to go back and say it's lost, correct? Is that?
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, like, at the end, we're downloading the, I guess,
Right,
like how, I can see that the ones that are still missing, we're going to put those into Vizor and say they've already been charged. But if they're not still missing because they got marked off because they were paid.
It's not marked off because they were paid, it's marked off because they were turned in.
Okay, so the paid ones never.
They're still missing.
They're still
So
missing.
they're still charged, they may have been paid by the parent or whatever, but it's still a
Okay,
charge.
yeah, I can see
So those
that.
need to be accounted
That
for.
makes sense.
Can,
Come in.
can we go over that a little bit more, like, so when
Right.
we are checking them in, like, let's say it's a buyback. They have their receipt on it for us at least, and it's a buyback. How are we're just dropping that in Vizor and then we're going back into it, or are we having to go back later and do a do a charge on that? How, can you explain to me how that?
so I think in the buybacks, it says they decide if they want it. It's like you did it, right? If they wanted to buy it, they went and they paid for it, they came to you, you check it in,
Yeah.
and it's done.
Yeah,
Okay,
because
so we
it's
don't
checked
put
in.
a charge in Vizor at all with that?
No.
Not for
Yeah,
bicycles.
because there's not a
Again, we're
charge.
trying to eliminate some of that
Okay.
work, right? That's why before they even come to you, they paid for it.
But you're saying a
They
charge
check it
for
in.
the $30 because it's a buyback.
Correct, so we don't have to add that in.
I honestly hadn't accounted for that, so I'm not exactly sure.
I don't think.
Do we care?
I don't think we're concerned.
Okay.
At that point.
If we find, we may find out differently, but yeah, we didn't really account for that.
I don't
It
think we
really
can.
just depends on the
And then there's
process that
Michelle
each
doesn't
school
need to know if it
uses.
was a buyback, so we
Which
don't
comes
need it in.
first.
Yeah, Art's exactly right. In Camille's example, they've already paid. They're coming to her with a receipt, and that's when she's putting it in. At which point, we care about the information. not-
Do you get the $30 for that buyback?
Yes, I do, because it goes in the same account as all the repairs.
So does Michelle need to account for that?
Oh.
Okay, until we know more, that's where we're going with.
It's a matter of whether we need to know. And as a district split, will they want to know more? Like, who knows, right?
State law.
They want to know accounting of everything, right?
There's gonna be a law passed that says you gotta account for Changes up here.
What's that?
The next legislature's gonna pass a law. The truth here.
True, or every little thing, which is what we're trying to do, right? Is it's been kind of willy-nilly. I like it, it's kind of, it's been a little loose. So maybe let's go over a scenario. Yeah, did we finish this yet, or maybe we're still going through? So if it's missing, right? Is that where we are at?
Yeah, we're at the, if Chromebook's not returned.
We're at that we're before that, like so. Does everybody understand if a Chromebook's not returned? It's kind of the same as everything else. Okay.
Yeah, it's similar to everything else, we just had to have the way of running the unreturned export report from Vizor, and it just can kind of let you know which ones are still assigned, and which ones haven't been turned in yet.
Are you?
I just had a question that just came to mind. So if we have kids that don't bring their Chromebooks in, and middle of summer, they bring it in and say, here you go, do we ever reset that out of Vizor or change anything in Vizor at a mass level?
It's
Or
problematic.
can I just scan that in and say, oh, there's the device, I know who it is, I know it's now checked back in?
Change the status, don't you?
Yeah, you'd have to change the status, you'd have to
Unassign.
get it back into your system. But my question is there any mass changes that we do to not have that student assign that Chromebook later?
If you check it in through Vizor, when it comes in, it should change the status to unassigned.
But it's still checked out to them until they bring it and I check it in.
Correct, so
Okay,
if the device is marked lost in Vizor, it doesn't unassign it to the user. So the
Okay,
user,
that's what I
it stays assigned to that user, and if they come back, in August, you'll know who you'll be able to scan it and see it.
I just know that my office staff are gonna accept 6 devices and then hand them to me on my desk and I'm gonna go, I don't know where these came from.
Isn't that problematic though? Because if they're returning a device, there likely was a charge applied to them, right? What about the finances? That's likely after July.
So that
Like,
is.
what happens there?
That's not anything we can resolve in the advisory.
refunds and does all that.
Yeah.
Once it goes,
What a
yeah.
nightmare.
It is.
It is a nightmare.
I'd rather
why they
just
want
tell them,
to-
sorry, you missed the boat.
You bought it. You bought it.
Yeah, to William's point, our responsibility is to get it back into Vizor, get it active, and get it back out to be reassigned. It will be the school and the parent's responsibility to figure out how to deal with a refund or whatever at that point. But obviously, that's not anything that's gonna be resolved on this side of the fence.
Something to note on Vizor, if a device is marked lost, it can't be checked in through the normal check-in, check-out process. It can only be changed from lost in the Chromebooks and assets view. So if it's dropped off to somebody who normally does the check-in, check-out, it'll pop up and say, cannot find this device because it's lost. And so you'll be able to, they'll have to be given to you so you can change the status to in stock again. So anything that's marked lost will have to go through you. That is your question. Great. Other questions on missing Chromebooks? All clear? That's mud. All right, and then we just kind of have suggested timeline, end of May, May 23rd, once grades are put in, once everything's done, disable any Chromebook in Google Admin, we put in that ticket for that. Then the week of May 26th to the 30th, that last week or further on, check with the financial secretary to get all the unpaid charges, or have a different way of, if you have a different way of checking that. And then start adding those to Vizor and change statuses to, or change the statuses in FileMaker as needed. And that is the end of this document. So that's kind of the suggestions we've got for end of year check-in. Thoughts?
When we submit our spreadsheets to remove mass Chromebooks from Chrome management, are you gonna also mark the box in Vizor to retire?
You're talking
I'm
about.
talking like
I thought that was
all
automatically.
800
Yeah, like-
seniors are leaving.
When it's deprovisioned, and
Who
Jason.
marks the status in Vizor, me or you?
The
Wait
status
till the
should
end of
be
May, we're
automatically
gonna discuss
changed,
this
which
in May.
again, we're gonna test, but it should do it automatically.
You're talking about retired, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
deprovisioned.
That's the end of May. You get to come back for that.
Because ideally, I would submit one spreadsheet and it would get removed from all three things.
It was working before, I don't know why it's.
We'll check to make sure if that's working, but if it is deprovisioned in Google Admin, it should automatically mark as deprovisioned in Vizor, which then changes the status to retired.
So just to clarify, one spreadsheet equals FileMaker, Vizor, and
Google Management,
Google Management.
that's correct.
Okay.
One ticket for a deprovision, should do
Or
it
to
all.
rule them all.
Good.
What do you see your spiffy ring?
Huh?
See your spiffy one ring to rule them all.
Yeah, that's the goal, so, yeah, if you guys run into something that doesn't look right or whatever, just let us know, and we can
But it's
verify
better.
it. We'll do that.
One
with
less thing
the
that you guys have.
Deeper vision with Chromebooks and make sure that that's functioning as expected.
I'll pay attention to the
Yeah,
next
it's that
ticket we
it's
get.
supposed to, but every once in a while,
Test them out.
things happen and
If you have one to
things
test
need
out,
to
we
be
can test it out.
located, so
Yeah.
we'll continue to work with it.
I just
Any other
started
questions
using a
you guys
license
have?
to testing, so. it's gonna be interesting.
One thing, can you go to Vizor? So one thing that you guys asked, and I'm just still finalizing a few things on this, but, the ability to see in a couple of different groups who at your locations, are in those roles, so the check-in, check-out role. So under the student view only screen, if you go to reports, there's a users by group report. You click on that, and then the two that you'll be looking for are one, you'll enter the report, it's the check-in out school. That's the role that those people have, so you can click that. And then the simple report is the one will be the best for you. It's just basically one person per line. And then you can filter by your school if you want to. We just asked them to add this, and so they did, but then we found out that the staff members didn't have locations mapped, so I'm in the process of getting that corrected right now. So the check-in, check-out, or this report here is pretty good right now. The financial secretary one is not, but it's not very long, so you can just look at that. Just don't put in a location and look for all of them, and just look for your financial secretary. So, and it's financial secretary and check-in out school. Those are the two, so you can see which of your users have those roles. So that way, if you need to add anybody or remove,
There's a
you
ticket
can run
template for that.
Go through the ticket for that, so. I'm just cleaning that up a little bit so that the staff members are mapped correctly, so there's still a little bit of work there. Okay,
That's good.
anything
New
else?
feature.
Anything else? Okay, go ahead,
Is
Tom.
there a possibility to give my check-ins, check-out people access to view and devices, like view-only devices?
We've talked about that. Right now, I guess what is the use case for that?
It's because when you can scan a device, and then you got it, it's on 3 different pages that you have to click to find the information that you're looking for. And that's the reason why.
What are they trying to find?
They've got to match a user to a device.
So because it's not coming up on the Chromebook?
For various reasons, like I gotta try to track who's got what. It's usually like a lost device or a return device, or like someone has 2 devices checked out to one person. There's use cases.
Right, yeah, and so we can talk through that. You can look up somebody in the student view and look at the details and find their assets in that view. Just, I am a little hesitant to give just everybody access to the Chromebook view.
Just, like, can you give view only rights?
No, not very easily.
Oh.
Yeah,
To put
just
it
the way
lightly.
that Vizor's
I get that then.
figured out, and so, I mean, it's, if there's a use case for a different role that we want to add for other people, you know, like a power user or whatever, that's one thing, but to just give, the idea for the check-in, check-out role was to be very simple.
Yes.
And,
Right, mine are just used to doing a lot more than they are,
Right.
and so they're like, why can't I do this? Why can't I do this?
right, and they wanna see more details on the device and stuff, so we try to provide enough information on that check-in, check-out screen. If there's something else that you want on that screen, we could potentially put more information there.
I think it's username and device all on the same screen.
So when you scan that barcode, doesn't that come up?
It's on two different screens, from the check-in screen.
I thought it was on the same screen.
I'll take screenshots and send it to you.
All right, great.
When you say they're used to having more, are you talking about like librarians? Because I think
They're
there's a
used
very,
to
a
tracking
very
a lot of-
specific, I
a
mean,
lot of this data.
I know that
Sure.
Angie would say, we're trying to take the librarians out of this kind of a role. And I understand that at some schools they do, but we don't want
There's
to
some
make
people
it
that
seem
want
like, well,
to
you
keep
know
it.
how to do it, and so you should, right?
I'm
It's
okay
a
with it.
hard, difficult balance.
Come in.
Just a question while we're on this, for reports, is it possible to, at least for me, I have not been able to find it, on the student view, when you go, like, can we see the history of what Chromebooks they have had checked out to them?
There
And
is.
when it's been checked in or checked out, like we used to be able to do in Alexandria?
You can run it, there's a report that, but it's,
Can we bring up a student and look in the history and see?
It doesn't, the
yeah.
history doesn't,
It doesn't,
It
it only
doesn't-
pulls up the history of
It's kind of a
actual
log, and
information.
Just for
so
It's
it's
not-
really, it's not the best, but you can run a report, but it's checking that whole log, basically, it's looking for that, and it takes a long time to run. But there is an option, I think there is a specific report that will kind of show that, but it's,
Because you can do it under the history of the actual Chromebook, if you know what
Correct.
Chromebook that they've checked out, you can't do it, at least from what I've seen, by the student.
yeah, and that has to do with the way
issue.
that the database is built, because the Chromebook has the field of the user. It's allocated to this user. The user is just matched through a join table, and it doesn't do it the other way. Sorry, yeah, it's stupid, but,
So the last batch of deprovision devices that I did, it did update in Vizor automatically to show as returned.
okay, so if you do run across that where it doesn't seem to happen.
Let me know if you don't. see
Timing
anything.
wise, it's supposed to be checking it multiple times a day, but it's, yeah, so it's not gonna happen immediately, but, you know, give it 24 hours and see if there's an issue, let us know. All right, anything else? Adam, do you have anything else that's outside of this that you wanted to talk to them about?
No, I was, yeah, I think we've covered most everything. Policy's gonna stay pretty much the same, guys. Pricing is gonna be the same for buybacks. The cost for replacements are all gonna stay the same, so let your administration know the policy's staying pretty much identical to previous years. It's just the procedure in utilizing Vizor here that's changing up a little bit for us here. As always, there are going to be scenarios that arise that are unique, that are different, you know. Work with your administration on that, and then don't ever hesitate to engage myself or other team members in that process as well if you need to just make sure you're hitting the mark, or if I need to address an administrator directly as far as this year-end stuff. And then yeah, I would probably say that's probably what I want to touch base as far as this process. I mean, Obviously, there's other end-of-year processes that go along with this, but we don't have to address that now.
All right. Thanks, guys. I think that's it. That's all we had. So thanks for your participation. And yeah, I mean, this is a work in progress. This is the first year we're doing kind of returns with Vizor. So we do appreciate all the work that you've done and the patience that you have with the product and the team. And so just continue to give us the feedback, trying to help in the ways that we can. Some things our hands are tied, obviously, but appreciate all that you guys do. We know it's a lot of work, and a lot of, I guess the recommendation I'd have is just, continue to work with your next gen teams and try to develop that process and refine it. Keep it an ongoing project, right? Update it each year to make it more efficient. So, thanks, guys.
All clap.
So if you guys want to come back to anything, just so you know, I think you probably are aware that in the YouTube videos, I put some index links that'll take you to that spot. If you want to, I'll try to index it best I can for you guys to come back and refer to it, use it as a resource if you want.
I feel like Vizor's not ever been a product.